This is based on a true life story. No names of any individual, including the narrator, family members, or associates, appear in this narration. This is by deliberate choice, due to serious security concerns and deeply personal reasons known to those involved. Full consent has been given for this account to be shared. I need you to stop scrolling right now. A man who owned a villa in Emirates Hills, Dubai, one of the wealthiest addresses on earth, lost his family, his reputation, his community, and very nearly his mind, not because of failure, because of a decision he made on his knees, alone at 1 a.m. And he told me he would make that same decision again without hesitation. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments right now. We are building a family across the world here. People who pray for each other, believe for each other. You are not alone wherever you are. I was 45 years old, a successful Muslim businessman in Dubai, when the life I had spent 2 decades constructing began to crack. Not from the outside, from the inside, where no one could see. I had the villa. I had the business. I had the wife and the son, and the staff and the reputation. And I had an emptiness so complete, so consistent, that I had stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing a hum that never goes away. I was performing every single day, performing competence, performing faith, performing the version of a man who has everything figured out. The performance was convincing. It fooled everyone, including me, for a very long time. The man who cracked the performance open did not do it with an argument or a sermon. He did it by simply being real every single day in the front seat of my car. He was my driver, a quiet Filipino man hired through an agency in early 2021. I interviewed him for 20 minutes on a Friday morning while I was thinking about 2 other things. He answered my questions simply, without padding. His references were excellent. I hired him and went back to my day. I did not think about him again until Monday, when he arrived 30 minutes before his start time with the car already clean, fueled, and set to my preferred temperature. Small things. But I am a man who notices small things, because in business, small things are where character lives. Over weeks, I began to notice other things. A worn Bible tucked quietly in the door pocket. Soft melodies he hummed when he thought the car was empty. And this was the thing I could not explain and could not stop thinking about. A quality of peace that seemed to live in him the way money lives in a man who has always had it. Natural, unperformed, simply there. I watched him from the back seat, the way you watch something you cannot categorize. He was not pretending to be content. He simply was. And I, a man with 20 times his income and a fraction of his peace, could not look away. In October 2021, my son became seriously ill. He was 9 years old, and the fever that started ordinarily climbed over 10 days into something that frightened the doctors who were trying to explain it. My wife and I lived in the hospital. I mobilized everything I knew how to mobilize, the best consultants, the fastest access, the most expensive interventions, and none of it touched the fever. None of it gave me back the thing I actually needed, which was certainty that my boy would be all right. My driver came the first day to take us to the hospital and stayed. Not because I asked him to. He simply stayed, sleeping in the car at night, appearing quietly when something was needed, managing logistics that no one had assigned him. The hospital nurses told my wife after several days that they had assumed he was family. On the 5th night, my wife found him sitting nearby in the corridor. She was staring at the floor, too exhausted to think or pray. She told me afterward that she had looked at him because she needed to look at something steady, and she had asked him how he stayed so calm. He told her. She said that his calm did not come from believing everything would work out the way we hoped. It came from trusting the one he believed was in charge of it. He told her he had been praying for our son every night since it started. And then he said the name Jesus, not as doctrine, not as debate, as the name of someone he personally knew. My wife was quiet for a long time after she told me this. She said what stayed with her was not the theology, but the quality of certainty. She said it sounded like the way a person speaks about someone they love deeply, specific, warm, real. She said she did not know what to do with it. I said I did not either. On the 8th night, the fever spiked dangerously. We were in a small waiting room at 2:30 in the morning. My wife holding her own elbows, Both of us passed the point of speech. My driver came up from the car park. He looked at us. He did not say anything. He bowed his head, and his lips began to move. My wife looked at me. I nodded. He prayed, simply, quietly, in a low voice, and he spoke my son's name the way you speak the name of someone you love. He told Jesus that my son's parents did not know him yet, but that Jesus knew them. He asked Jesus to show himself to our family through what happened next. Less than an hour later, the fever broke. The doctor came in with measured professional surprise and told us the change was marked and not entirely explicable. My son's vitals were stabilizing. I looked across the room at my driver. He was not triumphant. He was simply settled, that same settled quality I had been watching for months. He nodded at me once, quietly, and I looked away. My eyes were burning. Something had happened in that room. I did not have the language for it, but I could not pretend I had not been there. The months that followed were a private earthquake. I began reading. I typed a question into a search bar at 3 a.m, one I had been taught did not need asking, and I read for 4 hours. Historical accounts of Jesus, the claims he made, the crucifixion, the resurrection. I found a historical puzzle of genuine weight. The tomb acknowledged empty even by those who needed it not to be. Accounts written within years, not centuries, of the events they described. People dying for a story that would have been simple to disprove if it were false. I read the Gospels, slowly, the way you read something you are not just processing but encountering. I read about a God who did not wait for people to get their lives together before approaching them, who sat with the ashamed and the excluded and the broken, who came all the way down, not because he was forced to, but because the people he loved were worth the distance. Every other path I knew required climbing toward God. This one described God climbing down toward you. I knelt on the floor of my study at 1 a.m. in January 2022. I told Jesus everything. The emptiness, the performance, the hollow prayers, the son I had always been too busy for, the wife I had stopped truly seeing. I told him I believed he was real and that I was asking him to do what he came to do. What happened next, I will try to describe honestly. Something entered the room. Not a sound, not a light, a presence. The way the air changes when someone you love walks in before you hear them. And simultaneously, something that had been sitting on my chest for 20 years simply lifted. I wept on the floor of my study in a way I had not wept since childhood. Not from sadness, from release. Then came the persecution. And I need you to stay with me here, because this is the part that costs something to tell. The change in me was noticed before I had told anyone. My wife saw it first. A man who had been reliably absent was suddenly, genuinely present. She came to faith herself 4 months later, after her own private reading, her own private reckoning. Our son came with us. When I told my father, I watched grief cross his face. Not anger, though there was anger, grief. The grief of a man who looks at his child and feels that his child has moved to a place he cannot follow. He said things that were painful. Things I will not repeat, because they came from love that had been wounded, not from hatred. But they landed like blows. My brothers pulled back. Extended family meetings became silences when I entered the room. Social invitations stopped. Business associates who had built relationships with me on the foundation of shared religious identity began creating careful distance. Some did it politely. Some did it in ways that were not polite at all. The financial consequences were real. Professional relationships I had spent 15 years cultivating developed fractures that cost money to manage, and some that could not be managed at all. My son was asked questions at school that no 9-year-old should have to answer. My wife lost the easy warmth of her family gatherings, replaced by a careful tension that everyone pretended not to notice and everyone felt. There were nights I sat alone, because we had agreed not to expose our son to worse of it, and felt the specific cold of being completely outside the community that had formed me, not in theory, in practice, concretely, specifically alone, calls that used to come daily stopping. A cousin who had been like a brother to going silent. My mother calling to cry without finishing a sentence. The texture of that isolation is something I would not wish on anyone, and it was the cause of a decision that I have never for one moment regretted. which is itself a remarkable thing to be able to say. We eventually relocated. It was partly a business decision. Partly, it was the only decision that made sense for a family that needed space to be who they actually were without the daily weight of performing otherwise. My driver had returned to the Philippines by then. We said goodbye in the car park of the villa on his last day. I told him I did not have words for what he had given us. He told me he had given us nothing, that all he had done was be faithful where he was planted, and that the rest was not him. He said he was glad he had been allowed to be part of it. We embraced. Two men from entirely different worlds, made brothers by the same presence in the same boat. We speak still. He is back in his province, mentoring young workers preparing to go abroad, helping them hold their faith in environments not designed to support it. He has not changed. He is exactly who he always was. And that is the whole testimony, really. That the peace I watched from my back seat for a year was not the peace of easy circumstances. It was the peace of a settled question. The question of whether God is near or distant, present or watching from somewhere above, in the boat or somewhere on the shore. He answered that question not by arguing it, but by living it. In a car park, in a hospital corridor, in overnight prayer no one asked him to pray. And I watched it long enough that I could not pretend it was not real. I am no longer performing. I am no longer alone in the weight of my own life. A quiet man who hummed songs in the front seat of my car brought a hollow, successful, lost man home. And the God who sent him, the God who came, Emmanuel, God with us, is more real to me now than any deal I ever closed or any building I ever built. That is the entire story. That is everything. To every Christian reading or watching this, please pray right now for those who have lost family, income, safety, and identity because they chose Jesus. Their suffering is real, and they need your intercession. Do not let them carry it alone. If you want to receive Jesus today, simply pray from your heart. Jesus, I believe you are the Son of God. I believe you died for my sins and rose again. Forgive me. I receive you as my Lord and Savior. Come into my life. Amen. If you prayed that, tell us in the comments. We celebrate with you. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. You never know whose back seat this story might reach.